All right, here we go. We're talking about The Samaritan. Let's get into it. So this was a movie I hadn't heard too much about. I was doing some scrolling on social media not long ago, and I'd heard. I think I was doing the first I've heard of The Samaritan. I was watching a Sylvester Stallone interview about Rocky, and he'd mentioned the title of the film in passing. It was it was the end of the interview, and he said something about a project he was working on called Samaritan. Knew nothing about it, didn't know anything, had no idea what the heck it was about. And then probably in the last week or so, or maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I had seen a clip of something on social media, and I was interested. I said, "Oh, what's this?" You know. And I just watched it a few days ago, and I was pleased actually. I thought it wasn't what I expected it was going to be, and for a superhero type movie, it's not at all what you think it's going to be. I think in some ways, it's probably what you might expect story wise, but in a lot of ways, it's not. I was surprised that there are a couple instances that really got me, that bumped the movie up to, if it was like whatever I felt like it was, like, oh, it was okay. There were things about it that made me go, okay, it was slightly better than okay. I appreciated some of the choices that this movie makes. So what do we have? We have Sylvester Stallone as a character called the Samaritan, and he is sort of just hanging out. He's an older guy living his life. He's a garbage man, and sort of out of the way. He's the sort of lore, the backstory. We have it's a story about a Samaritan and his twin brother Nemesis, and they were sort of bitter enemies, or they became that way. And the film is sort of in the shadow of this backstory between the two twin brothers and what happened in their last battle 20 years or so prior to the start of the film, to the proper start of the film. And then we get this kid, Sam, who is played by, I forget the kid's name, Javon Walton? I don't know. The kid from Euphoria. If you've seen Euphoria, guy who plays Ashtray, you know that kid, he's actually very good. And he's good here. Actually, a lot of people, I understand, thought he was annoying, but I thought I liked him. I thought he was good here in this movie. So the heart of the film is really the relationship between Sam and Joe, who Sylvester Stallone's character plays, and it's cool. That's, I think, what you watch for. You're roped into their dynamic, and at first, Joe's reluctant to deal with this kid. He's actually quite reluctant to deal with anybody, and trying to stay out of the way. He's had his sort of time in the sun as a superhero, whatever it was, when in the early days, 20 years prior, and now he's he's older. He's sort of jaded, and wants to be left alone, frankly. But this kid is Sam is he keeps pushing, and before long a really nice relationship develops between the two characters, and I think it's actually kind of sweet a little bit. So that's what we have going on. In terms of the sort of structure of the film, for a superhero film, it's actually really light on action. There's only really one major. There are a couple of sort of little sequences throughout that play into superhero type stuff, but there's really one sequence that really goes all out in terms of superhero activity, if you will, and which is like in the middle, like the third act, and in a lot of ways there's something cool about that. I like that it's sort of it's a more grounded situation, and in a lot of ways, like something like you think of M. Night Shyamalan's films, Unbreakable, or Split, or Glass. Those films I think are great sort of reference points for the subdued types of superhero type stuff. It's not sort of bombastic and special effects everywhere and all kinds of crazy explosions. It's more about a character situation. I think those films, Shyamalan's films, are character driven things, and sure there's fighting and there's effects and things, but it feels toned down. It's not super like the MCU films. That stuff, spectacles all over the place. But non-MCU superhero films that are sort of deal with superhero characters, so something like Hancock, for instance, is another one. That had a little bit more because flying and different things, and there's like CG stuff going on. Still, those are character driven. They're character pieces. It's less about the spectacle and more about the human in the mix that we're following. And Samaritan is a lot like that. It's a lot like those films in that way. Like I said, there's only really one major, I would say, major sequence that could qualify as something that you would see in a superhero film. Everything else is sort of really tries to get us to understand who these people are, who this character is, and who this guy is, and what makes Joe tick. And I think it's really cool, like how it approaches the subject, and it sort of takes superhero stuff, and the best superhero films, I think, are ones that focus on the human side of what it is to be a superhero. The ones that examine the cost of being a superhero or a hero or being in living in that world. Because those ones really show us that sort of, I think, the crux point of any superhero film is really not so much the heroing side, but more the human side, like the person behind the mask or underneath the cape or whatever analogy you want to use. Those are the best ones. That's, I think, so great about characters like Spider-Man, where you see Peter struggling with his life as Spider-Man, and you get to see the human side of it, struggling with, trying to make ends meet, trying to, have relationships, trying to sort of maintain his jobs and all that stuff while fighting, super criminals. And the Samaritan, I think, does a good job of balancing there's flashbacks of like superhero type stuff, but really, it's not about that, and I like that about it. And so I think the character stuff was cool. I think Sylvester Stallone was solid. There were parts it felt like he was, I don't know if this was a character thing or what. We know there's a way that Stallone speaks. There's a bit of there's a slurredness, there's some slurred speech, and there's different things that go, oh, well, to me, it was like, okay, it was part of the character for me. But I also was like, oh, shoot, is that, because I've seen him in interviews and he doesn't talk like that. So he's not so slurred. Where it was like, oh, so just something that made me go, oh, it's interesting. I wonder how much of that is Stallone for real, and how much of that is he adding for the character. Either way, it's a unique, it's something that I noted. I wasn't too keen on the villain Cyrus. He wasn't as threatening to me. I wanted him to be a little bit more threatening. He was unsettling for sure. He made you feel like, oh, this guy makes you uncomfortable. But I don't know. He didn't seem as threatening as I felt like he needed to be. And in a way, maybe that's a good thing. There's something that because really it's a good. This is not a movie that is about the hero versus the villain. Cyrus, in a way, is kind of like this. He's the outside threat to the relationship between Sam and Joe. It really could have been anybody. It didn't have to be Cyrus. It could have been any sort of other villain character to play that role. And in that way, I think it's okay. But I think if you have someone who's poised as sort of hero character, whatever it is, you want, at least for me, for my superhero type stories, I like having a villain that is sort of substantial, that has some real meat, and has weight, and has and it could pose a potential threat to the hero. that's how I, and I think really when I think about it, Hancock's situation was similar with villains. There wasn't a real like super villain, like your main nemesis type thing. And I think that also was why that film, people had their problems with that film too, but that's why that film works in a way too, because it's not about Hancock being a hero. I mean, it is, but it's about him understanding. He's learning about he is turning over his life. He's been sort of a reckless hero, or reckless, human, who's been, alcoholic. He's more of on the sort of edgier side of life, and then he's turning over his new leaf. The film is really about his arc from the alcoholic hero person to a hero that people can actually count on, can look up to, can can be proud of. Yeah, that the guy's our hero of the city. And you could have any other villain in that mix, and it's about really love and what happened to his past, his backstory with his his person who his lost love, and there's something beautiful about that, and the uniqueness of how that is a sort of weakness in terms of, it's a strength, but it's a weakness in terms of his superpowers, and how love takes away his powers, and her powers too. It makes them both human, more like regular, so they can sort of live regular lives and things. And I think similarly, because the film is about that and not about the battle between good and evil and all that type of stuff, Samaritan is the same in that way. It's not really about him fighting, this all crazy, this major villain. It's about him fighting his own inner stuff and becoming, something that Sam could be proud of, that Sam could, look up to, and it's and in that way, it's cool in that way. So I appreciate that. So that part was cool. The what else? The cinematography. The film had some pretty good cinematography, some cool camera work going on, some decent effects. There were a couple areas where the computer generated stuff was a little bit off. It felt off. It made me wish that it was brief, but it made me want it to, I don't know, I wish it was briefer. I wanted it to be shorter, to the point where you couldn't recognize where the flaws were. I didn't want to see the flaws, and they were kind of glaring, so it took me out of the moment of the moment a little bit. But and it also sort of affects the emotional resonance of what those examples, what the scene should have been. I think having a shorter cut somewhere in there would have, because it wasn't all messed up. There were parts where it was great, and there were just like little pieces that crept up and, oh, that's a little bit too, that's kind of off a little bit, if I'm being honest. That aside, it doesn't hurt the film as a whole. I think it's a solid film. So if you're curious, I would recommend this movie. And if you like superhero stuff or superhero themed things or superhero related type of stuff, I think it's one to watch. It's not Unbreakable or Glass, Split. It's not Hancock. It's not really any of those films. There are pieces of it that will remind you of those films. Those films are probably stronger, but I think it's cool. It was cool to see Stallone in a role that was like a superhero type thing, and it was. I think the execution was cool. It was passable. I'm with it. I would watch it again. Yeah, I liked it. And yeah, give it a watch if you're curious about it on Amazon Prime, and see what you think, see what you make of it. All right, that's gonna do it for me for this one. I'll be back here. There's gonna be some other reviews coming up. I watched tech movies and I'm ready to talk about them. So for this one, I'm out, but I'll be back a little bit later. So see ya.